Mhm.
Yeah. Hey everybody, it's Chamber Matt, and I am here with Elizabeth Kreiselmaier. Did I say that right?
You sure did.
She said, look for Chrysler and all the vowels. And so I got Elizabeth here with us today. She is running as a Republican in the 6th Congressional District against the current incumbent Congressman Kilmer. And so thank you for joining us today, Elizabeth. It's great to see you. And I got a few questions for you. It's a pretty painless process. Hopefully, you won't break out into a sweat or start pulling your hair out or squirming too
I'll
much.
try.
So, so
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you having me today.
yeah, it's pretty simple. But I just wanted to start out. Maybe you could tell us about who you are. Um, One of the important questions is why in the world do you want to be a congressperson in today's day and age? And why do you think you're the best person to serve the constituents and the people of the 6th Congressional District here in Washington State?
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm just happy to be here. And yes, it's a very good question. People have asked me that repeatedly. Why on earth would you want to take this on? It's an audacious challenge for sure. But really, I'm doing this because I care deeply about this country. I love our country. I love our freedom, and it's fragile right now. There's a lot at stake in this particular election, and a lot is on the line. And I just felt I was asked to run actually by others for what they kind of saw in me, just kind of common sense, a common sense kind of leadership, and in things that I've done in my own past, which I can tell you a little bit more about. But I was asked to do it. It did seem like an audacious thing to take on. At the same time, though, I feel so strongly about, doing what we can to, protect what we all hold dear about this country and keep it moving in the right direction, in a good direction. And this was all pre-COVID. I signed on to do this, declared back in November of last year. So it was all pre-COVID, but there were things going on at that time in the House of Representatives, the impeachment, all that I was just upset about, and would speak about that. And I've been involved in my community for years now. We lived in Gig Harbor for 15 years, and I was in California and Oregon before. My whole life has occurred along the I-5 corridor. But I was asked to run, and because of what people saw in me, my abilities, and also my passion for the country. So I stepped into the challenge and have been on the campaign trail ever since, and really learning so much about, I love this country. I love Washington. I love my community and the people in the 6th District. I've just traveled around all 6 counties and marvelous people. And there's just a lot that could be better and different than in terms of our representation. So that's why I'm doing it, because I have that commitment, and I call it sort of the mom's ferocious devotion for the country. So I call myself a mom on a mission to clean up the house, and it's cleanupthehouse.com, as you can see on the sign behind me, which is where I stand. But it's also a lot easier for people to remember and to say than my last name, Kreiselmaier, as you said. I just say look for all the vowels, you will find me. So and then my background lends itself to this. So I am a mom. I see what's happening or what has been happening in our country, and I just want to preserve this country and all that it's good about it for my own child and for everyone else's. So it's really coming from a place of service. I am not a career politician. No, never had any intention of being a politician. However, I do have a heart for the country and a certain skill set. So, and related to that, my background is that I have a PhD, summa cum laude, from the University of Oregon, and about almost 20-year career in the field of program and evaluation in the field of education, special education, and general ed, and working at all levels of the education system, federal, state, and local, during that couple decades, and a couple of different institutes that I worked at. So I've got an ability to sort of size up problems and come up with solutions and implement them, and then evaluate, disseminate them, and just kind of getting things done efficiently and most bang for the buck. That was what my focus was, even when I was working back then. And being able to research, dive deeply into things quickly, get them a quick study, and just try to learn a lot and bring common sense to bear on practical solutions, and focus really on outcomes more than the process. There's processes that have to happen, and those are important, but I tend to be a very results driven person, and that's what I bring to the table and to this challenge.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for that. I won't hold it against you for being a duck. Um,
Okay,
'Cause
thanks.
let's take I'm
Neither
not
does my husband.
I'm not a dog or a cougar. I'm a Gonzaga, so I'm a bulldog.
Ah,
So,
mhm,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so all right, super. So for the first real question and we've got a discussion on COVID and stuff coming up too, but what
Okay.
do you see as the most important challenges is facing our country and how do you propose on addressing them?
Oh, our country right now?
Our country.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Our big the country right now is on really at the precipice. We're standing at the edge of the abyss of socialism and what's being forced and the directions that we are taking. So I think that if we do not, reelect President Trump and get Republicans into office and flip the House red and so on, that if we were to lose that, direction and end up with say Biden Harris or Harris Biden. Um, President, vice president, and any more Democrat control, it's really we're in a very dangerous place because as I will get to this later, but as I've traveled around and spoken with people, there's a huge walkaway movement right now from the Democrat Party as we've known it. This is not our parents or grandparents' Democrat Party. It's really been hijacked, I'd say, by the far left, most radical element of that party. What used to be considered fringe is now come into the mainstream and is being promoted. And really a whole redefining, reshaping, fundamental shift, as Obama had alluded to when he was running back then, of really shaping and reshaping, reshifting our country away from what we were founded as and the freedoms that we were founded as, in our Constitution, our rights and things enshrined in there that were always cherished in the past have been under assault. And just if we want to remain the country that we all know, love, and grew up in, and have it resemble anything like what we've known, it's just critical that we uh, we do elect Republicans and continue in that vein because we are the party of the Constitution and maintaining it in its original form and not redecorating it to our liking and thereby throwing things that make our country what it is, make America America. We will be unrecognizable. So there's that much at stake. So that is one huge thing going on in our country right now is the push towards socialism or even Marxism. I call socialism Marxism on training wheels. There is really a push to eliminate the freedoms that we have really taken for granted in our country. I think compared to other places around the world, they do not have the freedoms that we enjoy, freedom of speech and just everything else that we hold in our Constitution as dear, and Second Amendment rights, etc. All these things are in peril, and it's really critical that people vote responsibly and vote for the things that are going to maintain what they love most about living in this country. Because if they don't choose wisely, it's we're going to wake up one day in a very different place, and it's not going to be pretty.
All right, thank you. So another issue that's crunching the country, and you you mentioned that you jumped into this race before COVID came,
Hmm.
um, but now we do have COVID, and it's a very real piece of our lives right now.
Hmm.
As far as small businesses are concerned, beyond the financial support, like the grants and the CARES package, and the Washington State Department of Commerce has put out grants available to local businesses. Um, is there anything else other than simply throwing money at our local businesses that can assist in the recovery from COVID-19?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think I mean, we have learned so much. We know so much more than we did at the beginning when all the shutdowns were initiated and done. At the time, that was what was best to do because it was what we knew to do to protect people, and we thought this would be something we had to protect. We were, the early models were predicting doom and gloom and millions dying of this and people, pretty much dropping like flies around us. That is not what has happened. I mean, fortunately, it has not been that way, but the remedy in the form of the shutdowns was premised on that kind of a dire prediction of what COVID really looked like and who it really affected. And so what we need to do is really adapt to what we now know about this disease, this condition, COVID-19, and really target the protective efforts to those who are most vulnerable, which would mean reopening our economy. So there's the economic impact that, I would call it this, the economic impact of our actions taken in the form of these shutdowns is far, far worse now than anything COVID has ever done so far or could do, because there's so much collateral damage. So what we have to do, more than just focusing on how to kind of keep putting a Band-Aid on this gaping and widening wound of our economy that can, when our economy tanks and poverty ensues and businesses go under, as they have been right and left, then that creates its own nightmare of effects, and these increased suicide rates and the mental health issues and the schools closing and the kids not getting educated and all that goes along with that. The closures themselves have become so problematic. So what we really can do, and what I always say when I'm out speaking, is that the best economic stimulus is to get people back to work and get our kids back in school. We really have to focus there, and then focus on, there's something that just was put out recently by a group of doctors. I think it was called the Great Barrington Declaration, basically talking about focused protection. We know who the most vulnerable people are to this disease, this condition, COVID virus, and we need to protect them. But you protect them by, if anyone needs to be quarantined, it's the sick, not the healthy. And the spread has been, the numbers that matter the most are the hospitalizations and the deaths, and those have come way down. The herd immunity needs to be built up. There are ways that we can do all this responsibly and safely and not just kill our economy. We're, hanging by a thread here. I mean, things are starting to get better as things open up, but until we do open up, it will hang by a thread, and there's still more damage happening. So, for example, in one of the studies I'd written out, it's out of date already. It was a couple of months ago, but even at that time, there were 100,000 businesses across the country that have been closed permanently due to the COVID shutdowns. And in Washington state, that number was about 2,000 at that time. I believe it was May or June, permanently closed, and another 2,000, hanging by a thread because they were temporarily closed and they were hoping to, so there were things that it's just caused so much damage in terms of people's livelihoods. So yes, we need to save lives, and we know how to do that and how to focus those protections for the most vulnerable, the elderly, and those with underlying conditions. But for everyone else, we need to open up and get people back to work, get kids back to school, because we just cannot afford this ongoing induced coma to our society, to our economy.
All right, great answer. Thank you. So the next question I have is has to do with taxes. And I know you're aware we've got B&O taxes, we've got gas taxes, we have excise taxes, we have sales taxes, we have an income tax, capital gains tax, payroll taxes, property taxes, emission taxes, road and mileage taxes. It seems like there's a tax on everything. Are there solutions other than taxes available to address our budget shortfall? And what would be your preferred method for dealing with a shortfall?
Well, I mean, if you're talking at a federal level, I mean, we're now with the amount of, because there's the state level, which I would not be involved in, right, in a federal race. This is U.S. House. But certainly taxes, we've seen that the precedent is that when you lower taxes and make it easier for businesses to operate and create a business-friendly climate, then, that affects the ability to invest, the ability to buy, and the income to the coffers, whether it be state coffers or the federal coffers. The income to those coffers goes up as you lower tax rates. So that's something that I think the Democrats just never seem to grasp, that concept, but it's been proven over and over again. And we certainly saw that when President Trump put in his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the opportunity zones that were a part of that, which my opponent opposed, but then was happily doing photo ops in those opportunity zones as they came to be. But he was opposed to those. And when we increase taxes, it stifles the economy. When you lower taxes, it infuses the economy with life, and things start to, rise. The rising tide lifts all boats. So the answer to any kind of shortfall is never to tax more. If anything, it is to tax less and make it more business friendly for businesses to operate. So, for example, in our state, in losing Boeing, I mean, my opponent prides himself on his economic development background. Well, okay, but where does that background come into play with losing Boeing, with the the economy in our rural economies, timber and fishing industries that are part of the sixth district? There was no real infusion of economic development expertise there to get those economies going again because of my opponent's view on regulation and environmental concerns and overregulation that actually depress those economies and continue to do so. So even while under the Trump economy before COVID, the whole nation was booming economically and employment was dropping. But our district, the rural and timber economies, there were three of the counties that the unemployment rate at that time was still, twice as high as the rest of the state and the rest of the nation because of the policies that remained in place and the restrictions that remained in place that just dampened or stifled or in some cases killed off economies or businesses.
All right, thank you. So so more taxes isn't the answer, huh?
No more taxes is not the answer. Definitely not.
All right. Um, so then, the last question, because I don't want to keep you all day and our viewers all day, but another issue that's facing local businesses is finding an adequately trained workforce. Uh,
Okay.
Education funding is often left to local levies, and it's not adequately funded on the state level or on the federal level. What ideas do you have to update our school funding, and how would you implement any changes?
Well, for one thing, I would sort of rephrase that or reframe that a tiny bit because to me it's not just about the funding. It's never, it's what you said with the taxes, it's not just ever about the money. Pouring more money into a bad system or a dysfunctional system is not the never the answer. You have to address the underlying issue and the cause of the problem and what is wrong with the school system as we know it. It's not pouring, we've seen it over and over, and I have a background in education and I've seen more money poured into bad programs or dysfunctional in one way or another, and it doesn't improve the outcomes. So we have to start with what are the outcomes that we want to see. If we want a better educated workforce, and I imagine that's what you were referring to, is how do we have an educated workforce and fill vacancies? Well, then we need to look at what the needs are, and I do agree with greater technical education options and more and more options for students to pursue, not just the sort of track to the 4-year degree. There's things that we can do to incentivize the creating of options and multiple avenues of future for students who have different needs and different inclinations. So that's one thing. But really, part of the big problem in education right now that I see is that it has really in a way imploded with this. It has to do with the larger issue I referred to at the very beginning, the push towards the socialist Marxist ideology in our culture as a whole. The media is pushing it and the Democrats are pushing this. This is definitely showing up in our school system and the things that children are being indoctrinated with now at an earlier age, both in the socialist Marxist type direction and American founding principles. So, for example, the 1619 project that's being pushed across the country and trying to be pushed into our schools, that is an indoctrination. So I'm all for education, but not for indoctrination. So we're not equipping any time spent on that kind of effort or the comprehensive sex ed thing that was so in a bipartisan way across our state was just people, parents, me being a parent, I can completely relate, outraged by that, pushing that level of inappropriate content lower down. These are really this is way beyond the problem of our kids being taught reading, writing, science, big science, math, things that are going to help them to succeed in life and get jobs, good jobs, and fill employment needs. The extent to which those things are crowded out by these other agendas that have to do with indoctrinating our children, future voters, future citizens, into ways of thinking that are anathema to healthy economic conditions and the things that our country's founded on. Those are very, very problematic. And there's also been this just a total intolerance for a diversity of thought. So one of the things that I would say with regard to schools and even workplaces anywhere, if there is an intolerance towards diversity of thought, then you have not in any way achieved the stated goal anyway on the part of the left. They love to talk about diversity and tolerance, but if there is no diversity of thought, if all you're focusing on is skin color and things that are, those gender, skin color, cultural, whatever, that's fine to have diversity there, but you must have diversity of thought. If all you have day in, day out is a steady diet of one side of the political spectrum's views, there is no diversity there. There's no diversity of thought. So I feel very strongly about that, that the fact that we've seen evidence of this from K-12 and in higher ed, of students being punished for having anything but towing the dogma of the left going on in their classrooms, that is not acceptable. And there should be consequences to that, because it's really viewpoint discrimination. The left loves to talk about protected classes and protection from discrimination, but there's definitely needs to be protection of viewpoint diversity and not allow viewpoint discrimination. I hope that makes sense of what I was. So
Yep.
yeah, that's.
Yep. I understand. I
Okay.
understand. Yeah. So that's all I have. Let me scroll back up here and make sure. Yep, that's what I have for official questions.
Mhm.
And again, I wanted to thank you for coming out and spending this time with me. I want to encourage the viewers to look at the other candidate interviews that I've done, because I have done interviews for both the 26th and the 35th Legislative District and the Kitsap County Commissioner races. So check those out on our YouTube channel for the Port Arthur Chamber of Commerce. But before we go, I wanted to give Elizabeth, just kind of the final word, although it never turns out to be the final word, because I'm the host, I get to have the final word. But you can go ahead and give the final word here on this, if you want to, and then we'll let the viewers go. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt, again. Well, before I even do my final word, I did forget there was one area that I wanted to touch on that you didn't ask me about, but it has to do with the law enforcement of our laws and support of our police. And I just wanted to put it on the record here that I'm very much in support of our law enforcement officers at all levels that protect, the safety and security of American citizens, and that they have our backs, and we must have theirs. And so I am. I'm definitely a supporter of the police, and I am not one for reimagining the police, as Kamala Harris likes to say, and that my opponent is very much aligned with Kamala Harris, who happens to have the most radical voting records of any of the Senate members. So that's just something to take into account. But, we part of recovering, and, we've had to deal with all the COVID nightmare and the induced coma of our economy, but also with all the violence we've seen, the looting and the shooting and the everything that's come about with the social unrest and the vilifying of our police, that needs to stop, and there needs to be strong support for enforcement of our laws and support for those who help that to happen. So there's that. And then finally, as far as what I'd like to leave people with is really that there's just so much at stake. As I said in the beginning, I am running as a mom on a mission to clean up the house. And ask me questions. You can contact me at cleanupthehouse.com. And one thing that I do think also sets me apart from my opponent is that I have heard from many people now, as I've traversed the district, the 6 counties within the 6th district, is that not only are people upset with the alignment, such close alignment with Nancy Pelosi and other radical elements of the, Pelosi, Adam Schiff, Maxine Waters, he votes 98% with those, 95% with AOC and Ilhan Omar and the rest of the radical squad. These are people that are really not doing things, not voting in ways that are in the best interest of our district. He is much more aligned with perhaps Seattle, but he does not really match up with the needs and best interests of our district, at least as I have come to understand them traveling around. So there's that aspect of being what I would, tend to refer to as kind of a Pelosi puppet. We do not need that. Well, we need people who will stand up for the rights and the the freedoms and everything that we do hold dear. And that is not reflective. What he has voted on, the way he has voted, is far more radical than the moderate persona that he presents when he is here in the 6th district. So that is just something that I really like people to know, that someone who has presented himself as a moderate and is articulate and glib and nice, nice. That's great, but his voting record is not nice. And if anyone has a question about that or wants to go into more specifics that I don't have time to go into right now with time limitations, do feel free to reach out and call me. I am accessible, Elizabeth at cleanupthehouse.com, and I will get back to you. And that's the other element, is that just simply responsiveness, that my opponent does pride himself on, being nice and being a good listener and having all these things to help his constituents. But really, as I've traveled around, I've come across many, many folks in different counties who have approached with very real issues and problems, and were told just whatever they wanted to be. He's good at telling people what they want to hear in the moment that he's talking with them, but there's been a lot of dropped balls, a lot of unaddressed needs, and I think that it is time for that to change. And I am a person who's good at not just listening but responding and acting, to really take the action where I can and be bold about that and take stands that need to be taken. So I am a person who will smile and be nice as he can do, but I'm someone who's going to provide public service not only with a smile, but public service with a spine, and that's what we need here. So thank you so much. And yes, again, as I say, sometimes I am a mom on a mission to clean up the house, and with your help and support, I do hope and plan, and by the grace of God, to give Derek Kilmer a extended timeout come November.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Like I said earlier, 2 weeks and you can sleep through the night.
Yes, what a concept.
maybe take a mini vacation, go out to Ocean Shores and spend the weekend out there or something like that.
Yeah, lovely idea.
So thank you for joining us, and hopefully you will have a great next 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.